So everybody, evidently being outside or something, our audio and video were really choppy at the last go around 20 minutes ago. So we're trying again. Hopefully the lighting's okay in here. We just threw everything together in here. That being said, let's try it again. Being called to change the world as people of God. Now, I guess this is okay because it gives me another chance to talk to you guys about this, gives me another chance to get it in my head. But you remember those Rube Goldberg machines that were fantastically complex, but they really didn't do anything, like, wheels and things and kicking shoes, but they didn't do anything? Well, sometimes churches can be like that, and that's not a good thing. So what we're talking about today is we are called as God's people to change the world. Now here, let me go with Luke 13, 1 through 9 today. Here's what Jesus said. It's funny, it seems like I just did this 20 minutes ago. Anyway, at that very time, there was some present who told Jesus about the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mingled with their sacrifices in the temple, right? And Jesus asked them, do you think that because these Galileans suffered in this way, they were worse sinners than the other ones? Nah, I tell you, but unless you repent, you will all also perish as they did. Or those 18 who were killed when the Tower of Siloam fell on them, do you think that they were worse offenders than all the others living in Jerusalem? No, I tell you, but unless you repent, you will all perish just as they did. And then Jesus told this parable. A man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard. He came looking for fruit on it, found none. So he said to the gardener, see here, for 3 years I've come looking for fruit on this fig tree and still find none. Cut it down. Why should it be wasting the soil? He replied, the gardener, right? Sir, let it alone for 1 more year. I will dig around it, put manure on it. If it bears fruit next year, well and good. If not, you can cut it down then. All right, so here we have Jesus, and we're going to talk about changing the world as the people of God. Israel's calling was to change the world, to be God's partners in changing the world. They had forgotten that. Jesus is judging them for that. He goes and talks, some people came and said, Jesus, some people were killed up at the temple by that wicked Herod. What do you think? Why did they tell him? I don't know. But he said, they didn't deserve it. They weren't horrible sinner people. They were just like everybody else. But unless you all change your ways, and we'll get to this in a minute, unless you all change your ways, you too are going to end up like they did. And then Jesus goes on to talk about this Tower of Siloam. I don't know much about it, and you probably don't either. But we can probably say it was a tower in Jerusalem under construction, being repaired, or just fell over, Leaning Tower of Pisa style, and killed a lot of people. 18 people, national tragedy. But Jesus said, do you suppose these folks were awful people that deserve to die? No. But unless you guys change your ways, you're going to die too. Now, what I'm meaning here is Israel thought that because they were on God's side, they were God's special people, that they could just rest on that. They could rest on their laurels. And boy, they had a big streak of nationalism, nationalistic pride. God's on our side. We've got the temple. Nothing bad. And they'd forgotten that they were here to change the world. They'd forgotten that they were called to be God's partners in changing everything. And they became self-centered, self-righteous, very self-important. Sounds familiar sometimes, doesn't it? We have that tendency too. Now, Jesus goes on and he says, no, let me tell you a story. There was a man who had a vineyard. When Jesus says that, it's usually God. And the vineyard is, well, creation, and specifically Israel. And in his good creation, there was a plant, a tree, a fruit tree that was supposed to bear fruit, and it didn't. And he was going to cut it down because it was wasting space. Luckily for the tree, the gardener said, well, let's have a little grace here and give it 1 more year, but otherwise we'll chop it down. Now, this, of course, they would have all realized he was talking about Israel as this fig tree that was supposed to bear fruit. And it wasn't. Jesus was judging it as not bearing fruit, and it was going to be under judgment. Now, here again, Israel was supposed to be God's partners, change the world, but they had become prideful, nationalistic, lazy in their calling. And in AD 70, the Roman 10th Legion marched over the hill and leveled the city, burned down the temple. Everything was destroyed. They were judged by God as, just not doing what they were supposed to. Fast forward 2,000 years to you and me. As a church, or just as individual Christians, we can build Rube Goldbergs in our minds or as our church organizations that don't really accomplish much. And when that happens, we're under this same judgment. Bear fruit, be a fruitful tree, or be cut down and cast out of God's plan, God's working. And this is hard. It's hard to hear this because we want to run around saying grace, grace, grace. And, grace, grace, grace is awesome. But after we experience that grace, we have to do our best to bear fruit, fruit, fruit. Right? And everything that Jesus said is about bearing fruit. Right? Blessed are the meek, blessed are the lowly, blessed are the humble, blessed are the servants. Forgive 70 times 7. Go the extra mile. Don't hold back from anyone that asks you. All of these things Jesus gives to us as fruit bearers to do. Right? Let's see. I think I've got it on here. Paul's Galatians chapter 5. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. That's the fruit of the Spirit, changing the world. And if we don't, the judgment comes to us first. In the Bible, it says judgment comes to the house of God first. That's us. We as Christians are grafted into the vine of Israel in Jesus. So this is hard for us. God doesn't get as upset, I don't believe, at sinners as he gets upset at people who call on him and yet are hypocrites. We are called to be the people of God. We are called to be the church, not Rube Goldberg machines, but honest, sacrificial, loving people that change the world for the better. To be like Jesus. You see, Putin in Ukraine right now, he's trying to change the world through war, death, and destruction. We know that change only comes through love, self-sacrifice, forgiveness, and hope. We know that. We are given these tools and we are to live it. John chapter 20, Jesus said, as the Father sent me, I send you. So church, are we going in like the way Jesus did? Or are we going the way of Herod, the way of Israel, the way of Putin? Are we exhibiting the fruits of the Spirit? Are we changing the world around us? Or are we selfishly holding all things to ourselves, which means we are a fig tree that does not bear fruit? I hate to say that, but it comes to us. The spotlight turns to us because first, we've got to be fruit-bearing, honest, loving, true people of God. And I'm going to challenge you to that today. Are you that? Is your church that? Are we together as God's people changing the world? Or are we only play acting? What comes of that to us? I'm going to leave it right there. Landon, did we get anybody comment? No, nobody comment. You guys, one of these days, comment, like, share, subscribe, do the thing you're supposed to do. All right? Well, hopefully this one works, and I'll see you next time.